Well, good evening. It is so wonderful to have you back once again. This week we have some stories having to do with the experiences people have in the Rocky Mountains. If you are ever visiting, please make sure to be careful. You never know who could be out there. And with that being said, grab yourself a snack, sit back and relax, and hope that tonight will not be your last.
From 2013 to 2019, I worked in outdoor education at many different summer camps and outdoor education centers in Canada. Mostly Ontario, but I did spend a season in the Rocky Mountains. Having grown up going to sleepaway camp and eventually participating in month-long leadership programs with backcrunchy canoeing components, I was well prepared to lead a group of teen girls from a camp in Georgian Bay to a 2-week camping trip in the Tagami region during my first year as a counselor. Our route was fairly typical and beginning in the Whitefish Falls region, ending at Highway 11 after 14 days of paddling, portage, hiking, and campfire making. We had a satellite phone to check in with our camp director every day, and in case of an emergency. We also had multiple exit points along the route. Until our second to last night, we were having fun and relatively uneventful time, besides some mild dehydration and the usual bumps and bruises. Near the end of our trip, we were doing some free camping on the shore of an uninhabited island in Bear Lake. It's a beautiful area, and we were across from the main island that the majority of the 250-person population inhabits. We had to put out the fire and are gone to bed when about an hour after falling asleep I was jarred awake by the sound of a loud motorboat. Obviously this isn't that weird because it's a large lake and many people use boats to reach the mainland of their homes on secluded islands. However, it was around 11 p.m. and things had been quiet for the last few hours. The motor could cut out and I could clearly hear the sounds of an argument. It sounded at least one man and a woman, and they were very angry and yelling at each other, although I couldn't hear anything specific because they were too far offshore. Suddenly the woman screamed and I heard a splash into the water, and then complete silence. At this point I was pretty freaked out and hoping to God that my girls hadn't woken up. But I wasn't that lucky because I could immediately hear talking from their tent and could tell they were scared. I was about to unzip my door and look out to see if maybe the boosters had an accident or something when my whole tent lit up. The light slowly panned across me and onto the tent my girls were in. In a normal volume, I was able to tell them to stay absolutely still. The light panned back to my tent and then over to theirs again. I can only guess it must have been some sort of boat with a searchlight on it. After an eternity, that was really only about 5 minutes, the light was turned off and I heard the motor engage and fade as the boat drove away from us. I immediately found the satellite phone and called our camp director, who gave us the phone number for the local police. I called them, and they said they would forward the information I gave to the local detachment on Bear Island. I don't think any of us slept that night, and I got up at 5 a.m. to take my canoe out and take a look around. I thought maybe someone had fallen overboard and had managed to swim to shore. Obviously, I didn't find anyone, and there was nothing floating in the water either, although it is a pretty deep body of water. None of us wanted to camp one more night, so I called the camp and had them head out to the pickup point a day early. We paddled like hell and didn't really talk much. I think none of us really wanted to speculate about what we might have heard, and what would have happened if we made noise or moved when that light was on our tents. I've thought about this a lot over the years, but whenever I've told people the story, they've been quite skeptical. I recently started looking into missing person cases in the area, but without much luck. If anyone reading this is familiar with Indigenous issues in Canada, though, there is an epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women, and these cases usually go unreported or unresolved. So a few months ago, I was out hiking with my friend. We live in the western mountains of the Rockies, and we were about 6 miles into an 8-mile loop. We had done it frequently when we decided to take some pictures and eat a snack at a summit. This area of the trail had a park, some benches, tables, and a parking lot. We were sitting and talking, and I noticed a man just walking around the same parking lot alone. He was walking aimlessly and staring at his feet. What confused me was that he was in jeans and a button-down shirt, not exactly hiking attire. We decided to set off on the last 2-mile leg of the loop. This part goes downhill to the headquarters of the park and is cut out of the mountain and bank. The end of that leg is the parking lot where our car is. You don't have a lot of visibility from the trail, and you have to walk as a single file. I was walking in front and talking to my friend. I turned to look at her and I see the same man right behind her, following at a rudely close distance. I immediately got a gut-wrenching feeling. I noticed that he didn't have any pack or hiking gear, and he wasn't even wearing boots. Something about his eyes really spooked me. So a bit more walking, and he continues to fall very close. I say to my friend that I have to tie my shoe as a reason to step off the trail and let him pass us, in case he's only following closely because he wants to go faster than we are. She immediately catches on to what I'm doing and we pull over. He just looks startled and says hello politely. He just stares. This is when I notice that he is carrying a stick. As I'm fiddling with my shoe, she stands between us and he passes us. We wait to give him some distance ahead of us, but he immediately slows down. We wait for a bit longer and he gets to the furthest part of the trail that has sight lines to us and he turns around, looking up at us. We decided that something feels too wrong about this guy and we don't want to have to pass him again. So we turn around and walk back up the trail towards the park with the tables and parking. A few minutes of walking up the trail, I look back and see him walking up the trail too. He's following us. I tell my friend to walk faster. We book it up the trail and get to the parking lot area where we were at before. We start to strategize and wait, deciding that we will wait to see if he comes back up the trail to the lot. There are more people around here, so we felt safer waiting it out. About 20 minutes go by and nothing. We're talking about how that could mean that he kept going on the trail and is long gone. Or he's waiting on the trail, where it's more deserted. We see a couple come up from the trail where we were, presumably taking the loop in the opposite direction that we were. We approach them and ask if they saw anyone on the trail between this lot and the next. They tell us they saw a young man sitting on a rock about halfway down. They describe the man who was following us. We explain our interaction with him to the wife and get into a conversation back and forth about whether or not he was a threat. The husband finally interjects and says that we need to call a ranger. He wasn't just sitting there. He had a knife and was carving a stick. Needless to say, we called a ranger. The nice couple walked that last leg with us to make sure we got to our cars safely and then even gave us their numbers in case we needed anything. The rangers then walked the trail, but there was no sight of him. I wish I knew where they went and what happened to him, but I'm glad to know that my instincts are legitimate. This is a story from a road trip my fiancé and I took back in 2010. Our trip had relatively been uneventful, with a few exceptions. One of those was a trip through Colorado. We were on our way to the Rocky Mountain National Park, but it was getting dark and we needed to stop for the night. A quick look at the road atlas showed that there were a few campgrounds a short hop away. After a little discussion, we decided to try and find a few of them. The paved road turned into an unpaved washboard-like trail. The trees around us turned from pine to birch, and the forest just felt wrong somehow. But we continued onwards nonetheless, determined to find the damn campground. After about an hour of driving slowly, so we couldn't shake the car to pieces, we came across one of the camps. The campground was something like from the beginning of a mystery thriller. Everything was overgrown, the fire pits were growing weeds, the signs were all rusted or shot up, and the moon didn't quite penetrate the trees. We decided that this was not the place for us, and continued onward. Another hour of driving passed by. It was pitch black and the road got amazingly tough in spots for our tiny little Evio. We resigned ourselves to another night sleeping at a rest stop and began to try to find a way out. Suddenly, we saw bright headlights in the road ahead. We continued forward and found ourselves in a large clearing. Headlights from behind us turned on, blinding us from seeing the road out. 3 men wearing various expressions of anger and fear out of the gloom and approached the car. In the bright lights of the 2 trucks, I could now see a burned-out trailer, and all of the men were wearing black clothing. The look of malice on the men approaching my side of the vehicle burned its way into my brain, and I was instantly terrified. I yelled at my fiancé to floor it, and he was desperately trying to find the exit. We finally saw the trail marking reflectors across the clearing and gunned it out of there, with the men jumping out of the way in surprise. The final half hour before we finally found ourselves back in civilization was spent in creeped-out silence. We stuck to sleeping in rest stops and national parks after that. This took place in the summer of 2022, and I just never thought of writing down this story because I was so stunned that it happened to me. So every summer in the city, me and my friends like to make small campfires and chill in secluded areas because we don't want to drive an hour to the Rockies or an actual campsite and pay a fee to do so. These also happen pretty spontaneously, so it's a last-minute thing to do. There's this one spot near my house that's located by a river that's really nice because no one usually goes there. Only thing to be worried about are bears, though, because living up here is challenging like that, and my house specifically is located right next to the mountains and forest. So one particular night at about 11 p.m., I decided to go ahead of my friends and meet them at the spot and set things up early because I want us to be chilling once they all get there. The spot I get to has a 2-minute paved markway I have to go through, and then I have to take a small trail ramping down the right side of the bridge that crosses over the river. Along this paved walkway is 2 lamps located at halfway and another at the start of the bridge, the ramp down to the campfire spot. I park my car at the beginning of the trail on the street and bring my campfire stuff like a flashlight, lighter, small firewood, small shovel, etc. I get to the spot and it's a small sandy beach kind of embankment on the side of the river with a small waiting area for toddlers with their families during the hot summers. So I set up the chair and I get to digging the pit with only my flashlight illuminating where I'm digging. I'm also just shoveling the sand right next to me, nowhere near the water, but all of a sudden I hear a loud splash. A splash so loud that it can only come from something equally large like a 2-hand-sized rock. I'm confused because I swear I'm not throwing my sand into the water, even though I'm only a few feet away. I shine my flashlight at the water and I don't see anything, so I just kind of brush it off, thinking I'm just hearing things. But as I keep shoveling a bit more, I hear another loud splash. At this point, I think something is falling from above because logically something must be falling into the water. I point the flashlight above where some trees are above the river and I don't see anything big. So as I keep digging with my heart race kind of going at this point, I hear a rustling past the arch where the bridge goes over the river. I quickly grab my light and shine it towards when I heard the rustling. I call out, "Hello?" No response. In my head, if it was a bear, it should be getting out of there immediately, but there was no bear, or signs of anything for that matter. So I tell myself I'm just hearing things now because I've seen horror movies before and now my mind is playing tricks on me. But I hear the noise again and it clearly sounds like leaves being rustled, so I shine my flashlight over the area again. And as I focus my eyes towards the illuminated area, I see the naked back of a man hunched over. I was kind of frozen in anxiety and stress because honestly, of all things I was to see, I didn't think I'd see the naked back of a man. From the quick analysis my brain could muster up, he looked to be mid-40s, shaved, not bald, and medium-ish build, like a mix between chubby and built. As I had my flashlight staying on his back, he started to stand up, and the first thing I noticed was he wasn't wearing any pants either. My next reflex was to start packing up all my crap and getting out of there, because now I'm piercing my head with he must have been throwing things into the water to scare or shoo me away. So after using my reflexive deductive skills, I proceeded to speed walk out of there with all my stuff. I'm carrying all my things with me and briskly walk up the small ramp, and I'm on the paved path now out of the forest. I can feel my heart beating in my chest, and I'm frequently looking back to make sure I'm not being followed. I'm wearing Crocs, mind you, so I'm hoping that if I have to book it out of there, I'd regret not being in sport mode from the get-go. I make it to the halfway point, and I have a sense of relief start setting in, knowing I made it safely out of this very scary situation. But as I check behind me for the final time, I see something. Slowly creeping over the ramp is the naked man crawling on all fours as if he was a primate walking. His head was positioned towards me, looking at me as he made his way to the middle of the paved walkway. He slowly gets up from his stance and starts standing on his feet and positions his body to face me. After setting himself into his new position, the man starts running towards me. I freaking book it. I run as hard as I can down the path. My flashlight jumped out of my pocket and I lost it. But I didn't care because a whole naked man was chasing me at 11 p.m. at night in a secluded forest. I looked back for a split second and the man was still running towards me, still completely naked. He could have my flashlight for all I care. I wanted to make it out of this situation alive. I finally make it out of the forest and run to my car, which is only 30 feet away from the end of the forest. I desperately get to my car and like a classic horror movie, I fumble with trying to get my key fob to unlock the car. I actually drop my keys and quickly think to myself, I'm actually dead. But I brush the thought off and pick them back up. I get my fob properly, unlock my doors, and throw my things into my back seat before getting into my car. This felt like an eternity, but in hindsight most likely took 6 seconds altogether. As I try to guide my key into the ignition, I am fixated on one end of the paved path that I was just at a few seconds ago, waiting to see if the naked man was still coming. I feel my key go into the ignition and I switch my sights onto the road in front of me, and I zoom out of the area as fast as possible. As I drive away and I'm a good 30 seconds from the location of the horror that just took place, I get a call on my phone. It was my friends calling me asking if I made it to the spot, and all I say to them is, "Guys, do I have a crazy story to tell you?" They pull up to my house because, again, it was actually decently close to the campfire area, and I tell them the whole story the way I told it just now. They swear that it was none of them trying to prank me or anything like that. And I also knew one of them would try to full sprint at me with their dong out. But as we're just talking out in front of my house, there's a college student who looks like he's walking home that's going toward the direction of where I encountered the naked man. I just yell out to him, "Be careful, there's a naked guy that was chasing me by the bridge that crosses over the river." He responds, "Oh damn, really? I gotta go over that bridge to go home." All I tell him is good luck. The next day I reported it to the police by phone, but they sent over an officer so I could tell them in person and show them where in the areas I saw these things. When we went to see where I initially saw the man's back hunched over, they said they didn't see any trace of anyone being there, but the officer said they would make note of it anyway in case it happens again. Some friends say it's a skinwalker. Others say more realistically it's either a homeless or mentally ill or a drunk person. One theory I've heard my friends say is that it's a future version of me pulling a prank on a past version of me because, honestly, if time travel is real, I would totally screw with my younger self like that.